The quiet night settled over the island of Rhodes, with only the sound of the sea breeze slipping through the pine trees and the waves softly whispering against the shore. Eleni Topaloudi, a 21-year-old girl with a bright future ahead, was lying relaxed in her small apartment, letting her mind drift along with her favorite music. The next day, she would have to return to the hectic rhythm of piled-up assignments and an upcoming presentation, but none of that could erase the gentle smile that always rested on her lips. In the midst of that peaceful atmosphere, a sudden knocking echoed at the door, a sound so out of place that it made her freeze. Eleni briefly assumed it might be the friend who had promised to pick her up for dinner or a walk by the sea. The knocking continued, more insistent, making her heart beat faster with a mixture of excitement and unease. She stepped forward and opened the door in a vague, eager anticipation. But when the door swung wide, there was only thick, suffocating darkness and a chilling silence waiting on the other side. The dim streetlight fell on a grimy, abandoned slipper, and beside it, a dark stain of blood spread across the wooden floor in heavy patches. Eleni was stunned. Her whole body instinctively backed away as her eyes widened, unable to believe the scene in front of her. In that fleeting moment, every sense in her body tightened to the point of pain, and her trembling hands fumbled for the phone in her pocket. The screen lit up, revealing an unsent message. "Help me." The red letters on the bright background looked like a bloody scratch, making Eleni scream in despair. It was her final cry for help, one that would never reach anyone in time. And then, as the apartment sank into silence, only the cold echo of hurried footsteps fading away and the smeared bloodstains under the light remained. That scene sealed off the fragile peace of the Rhodes night, opening up a heavy, haunting shadow for anyone who witnessed it, as if, from that very moment, Eleni's beautiful life had been swallowed whole by a darkness with no way out. Have you ever wondered whether an invitation that seems completely harmless could hide a terrifying danger beneath it? I believe Eleni, just like so many young women, never imagined she would become the victim of such a brutal crime. She thought that evening's meetup with friends would be filled with laughter and carefree moments. Yet, in just a fragile instant, her life was swept into a spiral of tragedy with no escape. And isn't it true that it's precisely these ordinary, familiar moments that remind us how quickly our sense of safety can disappear? Try placing yourself in that situation. A simple hangout like any other day, a message that pops up in the middle of the night, seeming harmless at first glance, and then disaster strikes without warning. When faced with something like that, what would you do to protect yourself and the people you care about? This is a story that carries a powerful warning for all of us. Eleni Topaloudi was born on the 15th of January, 1997, in Serres, northern Greece, and grew up in the small town of Didymotiko in the Evros region. To her family, she was a source of pride, a young woman with a warm smile and a deep desire to explore the world. In 2016, Eleni left her hometown to study Mediterranean studies at the University of the Aegean on the island of Rhodes. That decision didn't just open a new academic path for her, it gave her a chance to live independently, to grow, and to pursue dreams waiting to unfold. At 21, Eleni was a final-year student, intelligent, hardworking, and kind-hearted. Friends remembered her as gentle, approachable, always willing to lend a hand, whether it was academic help or simply listening to life's daily joys and worries. With her sincerity and warmth, she left a beautiful impression on everyone who crossed her path. Life on Rhodes was peaceful yet vibrant for Eleni. She often told her parents about engaging classes, her visits to the famous Pefkos beach, or the evenings spent with friends watching the sunset from the hill near the dormitory. In her family's eyes, she was a dutiful daughter with a pure, compassionate heart. Her dream was simple: to be useful, to contribute to society, whether through academia or by becoming a teacher someday. That future had once seemed so clear, so full of promise, until a tragedy no one foresaw came crashing down, closing the door on all the beautiful things she had been reaching toward. In the days leading up to that fateful night, Eleni's life unfolded as calmly as that of any other final-year student. That day, she had just finished her class assignments and spent the afternoon relaxing with a few friends in the dormitory. By evening, a friend she had known since her first year messaged her unexpectedly, inviting her out for a quick bite. At first, Eleni planned to decline because she felt a bit tired, but then she told herself, "It's just a simple meetup. It might be fun." Perhaps a strange feeling flickered somewhere deep within her, but she brushed it aside because she trusted that friend. Eleni picked up her phone, smiled, and replied, "Sure, let's grab something." They quickly chose a familiar seaside snack spot. She changed her clothes, did a bit of light makeup, fully believing it would be just another ordinary evening out with friends. Yet, in that very moment when she stepped out of her room, the wheels of fate had already begun to turn silently, inevitably, without her knowing. Before leaving, Eleni put on a light jacket and stepped out into the warm, fading glow of the Rhodes sunset. Waiting outside the building was a white van, the vehicle belonging to the friend she trusted. She greeted them with her usual bright smile and climbed in, completely unaware of the danger ahead. At first, the ride seemed perfectly normal. Soft music played in the background, laughter filled the space, and the youthful atmosphere felt lively and carefree. Eleni chatted about her classes, hummed along to the radio, and sent a message to her close friend assuring them she was fine and would be home soon. But beneath the laughter, a faint sense of unease lingered inside her, subtle, fleeting, and hard to name. She reassured herself it was nothing, that they were all friends, that there was no reason to worry. When another message came in shortly after, she hesitated to open it, telling herself that if anything urgent happened, her phone would notify her again. And so, with that gentle smile still on her lips, Eleni continued to trust the people sitting beside her. As night deepened, Eleni enjoyed the food and conversation, completely unaware that behind the shimmering city lights and easy laughter, a cruel tragedy was quietly approaching. Evidence later revealed that close to midnight, she left with the two young men and drove toward a small house in Pefkos, a remote suburb of Rhodes. Meanwhile, her close friends kept trying to reach her, but received no reply. From 22:11 to 23:42, Eleni still exchanged messages, reassuring everyone that she felt safe and planned to sleep soon. But around 1 a.m., while she was with the two men, she sent a strange message. "Call me after 1." Many believe she may have sent it deliberately, a silent warning to herself, a possible escape plan she didn't fully realize she was making. The next morning, Eleni still hadn't returned to her room. Her friends grew uneasy, calling her again and again, but every attempt fell into a terrifying silence. As dawn spread its pale pink light across the sky of Rhodes, worry rippled through the student community at the University of the Aegean. At the same time, Eleni's family in Didymoteicho received a chilling call. An unidentified female body had washed ashore near Phokios, by the town of Lindos. Police immediately secured the scene and transported the body for examination. And then, piece by piece, everything began to fall into place in the most horrifying way. Eleni, the gentle, cheerful student known for her warm smile, might never come home again. While her friends frantically checked missed calls and unread messages, her family and the university community could only wait for the call from the police, a call no one ever wants to receive. Yet deep down, they already feared it would bring the worst possible news. As soon as authorities confirmed that the body found off Phokios belonged to a young woman, Rhodes police launched an urgent investigation. They reviewed missing person reports, compared identifying features, and quickly noted the rose tattoo on the right calf, a detail matching Eleni Topaloudi's description. Only a few hours later, a phone call was placed to Didymoteicho requesting that Eleni's family travel to Rhodes for identification. Her parents, Giannis and Kula, nearly collapsed upon hearing the news, but still made the journey because they knew that hoping for a miracle was no longer possible. On December 1, 2018, inside the cold, silent room of the morgue, Giannis embraced his daughter's lifeless body and faced the heartbreaking truth. The victim was indeed Eleni. Meanwhile, Rhodes police continued gathering evidence with meticulous precision. From security cameras around Pefkos to footage along the roads leading back to Rhodes City, investigators found images of two young men driving a white van with Eleni inside on the night she disappeared. A shopkeeper also reported seeing the van parked outside his store around 11 p.m. on November 27th. By the morning of December 2nd, the owner of the van, a local man, was brought in for questioning. He claimed his vehicle had been taken without warning and mentioned that a young woman had been stuck in the back seat that night. That statement immediately led police to two names: Alexander Luka, 19, of Albanian origin, and Manolis Koukoras, 21, a local from Rhodes. When summoned, both appeared unnervingly calm, maintaining an air of innocence as they sat across from investigators, a composure that would soon crack under the mounting evidence against them. The initial interrogation sessions were tense from the very beginning. Both suspects dodged questions, circling around details, each trying to shift the blame onto the other. Alexander insisted he had nothing to do with any violence, while Manolis repeatedly claimed that none of it was his fault. But their denials began to crumble the moment police presented the DNA evidence found inside the van and the forensic traces matching the scene. With no way left to escape the truth, both were forced to admit that they had indeed taken Eleni to the house in Pefkos that night. From there, their statements slowly revealed a darker picture. Eleni had resisted actions she did not agree to, and her firm refusal had escalated the situation into something dangerously out of control. In a final attempt to defend themselves, the two continued denying any involvement in her death. But the chain of security camera footage, the evidence inside the van, and their contradictory testimonies made further concealment impossible. On December 5, 2018, after completing DNA analysis, reviewing surveillance videos, and cross-checking all statements, investigators officially identified Alexander and Manolis as the prime suspects. They were both arrested the same day. Even then, as they were being escorted away, they tried to appear indifferent. Manolis even shrugged, as if he had simply been caught in some unfortunate misunderstanding. But under the harsh lights of the interrogation room, there was no place left for that facade. They blamed each other relentlessly, shifting their stories back and forth. Yet the puzzle pieces slowly aligned: the timing, the scenes, the traces they left behind. And just like that, the chilling outline of the crime began to solidify before the investigative team, preparing to reveal the full truth of what happened on Eleni Topaloudi's final night. When investigators pushed open the door of the apartment in Pefkos, the place the suspects claimed belonged to a friend, they immediately sensed something was wrong. Inside, the room was chaotic, filled with signs of a violent struggle. Stained patches on the walls, toppled furniture, a crooked light fixture. Everything looked as though it had been overturned in panic. It didn't take long for the team to recognize the marks of someone desperately trying to defend herself, trying to escape danger. Every detail reflected the terror and hopelessness Eleni must have felt in those final moments. On the floor, they discovered a blue pen with a distorted shape, alongside traces, suggesting it may have been involved during the confrontation. In the corner, Eleni's phone lay abandoned, its screen still glowing with an unsent message. That faint light, lingering in the stillness of the room, felt like a haunting echo of Eleni's last attempt to reach out. Around the apartment were clear indications that three people had been present: clothes thrown aside, half-finished food, cigarette smell hanging in the air. Objects strewn along the hallway showed signs of a struggle. Among them, police found a fast food receipt that perfectly matched the time frame captured in the surveillance footage before Eleni disappeared. On the table, her notebook lay open, displaying hurriedly written lines, words revealing just how cornered and distressed she must have been. The white van's forensic examination further strengthened the case. Eleni's DNA appeared in multiple locations, consistent with a violent altercation inside the vehicle. Combined with the evidence from the apartment, the damage to objects, and the full sequence of security footage, everything pointed unmistakably toward Alexander and Manolis. Piece by piece, the truth had been reconstructed, and there was no longer any doubt about their involvement. When the suspects were brought back into the interrogation room, the evidence laid before them left no room for denial. In one portion of his testimony, Alexander admitted that Eleni had begged to be taken to a hospital, a plea that clearly revealed the level of danger she had faced. It was the final piece showing that the events of that night had spiraled far beyond anything either of the perpetrators could control. From the small attic room in Pefkos, to the white van, to the conflicting statements, the secrets of that tragic night were uncovered one by one, as if each detail were speaking for itself, helping investigators piece together the crime that ended Eleni Topaloudi's life. For a long time afterward, the name Eleni Topaloudi lingered like a haunting shadow in the minds of everyone who learned about the case. Her body had been discovered by the Hellenic Coast Guard on the morning of November 28, 2018, near Phokias Beach, close to the village of Pefkos. When it was brought to shore, the physical characteristics matched perfectly with the missing person report. A young woman, about 21 years old, tall, with dark hair dyed a soft hazelnut brown. But what chilled investigators was not her appearance, it was the injuries on her body, evidence of the brutal violence she had endured in the final hours of her life. The forensic doctor quickly proceeded with the examination and delivered the initial conclusion. The cause of death was drowning, accompanied by severe head trauma caused by forceful impact against the rocky seabed. What sends shivers down my spine, and likely yours as well, is the fact that Eleni still showed signs of life before she was thrown into the sea. She was still fighting to survive after everything that had happened, and only when her body was submerged in the harsh, freezing water did she finally lose that battle. Shortly afterward, her remains were transferred to Athens for preservation and further analysis. By November 29th, Eleni's family received the official confirmation. Inside the cold room of the morgue, her parents, Giannis and Kula, painfully identified their daughter. The sight of Eleni lying still, as if merely asleep after a long day, made their grief all the more suffocating. I can only imagine the feeling of her father, as he gently touched her face and whispered a final message of love. "Rest now, my girl. Your father is here." All of Eleni's plans, her studies, her dreams, the bright days she spoke of to her family, were reduced to ashes in an instant. News of her tragic death spread rapidly across Rhodes, casting a heavy pall of sorrow over the entire student community and local residents. This wasn't just another case. It was the devastating loss of a daughter, a friend, and a young woman with her whole life ahead of her. It became a wake-up call that shook all of Greece. When investigators finally assembled every piece from the night of November 27th, the truth became clear. According to reconstructions and evidence, Alexander Luka and Manolis Koukouras had taken Eleni to the attic apartment in Pefkos under the guise of a friendly get-together. But the moment the door closed, the atmosphere changed. The two young men, only 19 and 21 at the time, no longer behaved like the acquaintances she thought she knew. They surrounded Eleni, cornering her in the room. Manolis restrained her arms, while Alexander held a hard object in his hand, his demeanor turning hostile and frightening. Eleni cried out for help, but on that night, no one was there to hear her. Eleni tried to step back, tried to break free from their grip, but her strength was no match for two grown men. During the struggle, a heavy blow struck her head, leaving her dizzy and collapsing to the floor. There is no need to elaborate. You can already imagine how horrific it must have been. A strike powerful enough to knock her unconscious and rob her of any ability to defend herself. From that moment on, every hope of escaping the Pefkos apartment seemed to fade into darkness. Yet even in that nearly exhausted state, Eleni had brief, flickering moments of awareness. She whispered a plea, asking to be taken to a hospital, a plea Alexander himself later admitted during interrogation. It was a moment that revealed the full depth of the terror she endured. But the two perpetrators showed no sign of remorse. Instead, they focused only on handling the situation, trying to cover up what had just happened inside that room. Eleni was carried down to the white van in an unresponsive state. According to testimonies and forensic evidence, the two men drove toward a desolate rocky coastline near Phokias. The narrow, winding road leading to the sea at midnight made the entire journey even more chilling. When they arrived, they dragged Eleni out of the vehicle and placed her at the edge of the rocks. What is heartbreaking and unbearable to imagine is that the forensic report confirmed she was still showing faint signs of life at that moment. But instead of calling for help or taking her to a hospital as she had begged, they chose the coldest solution possible. They pushed her into the dark sea. In the night air of Rhodes, the crashing waves and the wind became the only witnesses. Eleni fell into the freezing water, and just like that, her story ended in absolute solitude. What outraged the Greek public even more was the attitude of the two young men afterward. They returned to the city, washed their clothes, continued their daily routines, and even showed up at cafes and the gym as if nothing had happened. The court later described their behavior as a level of emotional numbness, deeply disturbing, a chilling indifference unimaginable for men their age. Everything they did, from luring her, restraining her, assaulting her, to disposing of her, revealed the full cruelty of their actions. You and I do not need to recount every detail to feel the brutality of this crime. It remains one of the cases that shook Greece to its core, leaving anyone who hears it breathless with grief. When investigators examined the motive behind the crime, they uncovered a chilling truth. It was the distorted mindset and warped egos of the two perpetrators that led to the tragedy. Manolis Koukouras and Alexander Luka were young men whom Eleni had once considered friends. She had eaten with them, talked with them, laughed with them, never imagining that the trust she offered would become something they exploited. When Eleni firmly rejected their demands that crossed the line, the wounded pride and bruised egos of these two young men erupted in the most extreme way. The investigation revealed that Alexander believed he somehow had the right to be accepted by Eleni, while Manolis had a history of violent behavior and multiple prior accusations. Eleni's unexpected resistance exposed their true nature. They interpreted her refusal as a challenge, something unacceptable. From there, the twisted anger festering inside them spiraled into an act completely beyond control. During interrogation, their attitudes made investigators shudder. There was no remorse, no regret. Instead, they tried to shift blame onto Eleni with absurd excuses. Alexander claimed she had upset them, while Manolis cited unverifiable statements to make the victim appear at fault. Some Greek newspapers even recorded the two men, attempting to pin the entire tragedy on Eleni, as if turning her into the cause of her own suffering. In court, the defense attorneys attempted to construct a distorted narrative, spreading baseless claims to reduce their client's punishment. False accusations that Eleni had mental issues or was in debt were met with fierce public backlash. You don't need me to explain, this is the kind of inhumane argument that tramples on the dignity of a victim who can no longer defend herself. But ultimately, all the evidence pointed to a truth that cannot be disputed. The motive of the two perpetrators was nothing more than selfishness, violent tendencies, and a diseased way of thinking. They weaponized their physical strength to force what they wanted, and when refused, they responded by unleashing their rage on a young woman who had no way to defend herself. Psychologists describe this as a manifestation of a disordered personality, a complete lack of empathy for another person's pain. When the details of the case were exposed to the public, Greek society was shaken. People didn't just mourn Eleni, they were outraged by the sheer inhumanity reflected in every testimony, every indifferent gesture from the two men. And in that immense sorrow, Eleni's family understood that her death was not only a personal loss, but also a warning about the darkness that can hide behind the most familiar faces. The trial of Manolis Koukouras and Alexander Luka began in early 2020 at the Mixed Jury Court of Athens, drawing national attention across Greece. After months of tense proceedings supported by undeniable evidence, the court concluded that both defendants were guilty of premeditated murder and gang sexual assault. On the 15th of May 2020, the jury unanimously delivered the maximum sentence permitted by law: life imprisonment without parole for the murder, plus an additional 15 years for the related charges. No mitigating factors were accepted. The verdict brought a sense of justice to the public, but for Eleni's family, It could only soothe a fraction of an immeasurable pain. The courtroom on sentencing day felt unbearably heavy. Eleni's parents sat in silence, their eyes swollen after months of emotional exhaustion. When the verdict was announced, her father, Giannis, broke down, his voice trembling as if he had spent the last of his strength. "We have been dead inside for a long time. There is no light left in our lives." Meanwhile, the two defendants remained emotionless, even pacing casually around the courtroom, as if the trial had nothing to do with them. That sight ignited even deeper fury in Eleni's family, prompting her father to stand and demand the harshest possible punishment for the men who had taken his daughter. After the trial, Eleni's family gave only a brief, heart-wrenching statement to the press. They acknowledged that justice had been served, yet nothing could ever compensate for such an immense loss. Eleni's mother, Kula, tearfully expressed her hope that the law would protect other women so they would never suffer as her daughter did. News of the verdict spread rapidly, sparking a wave of outrage throughout Greece. Hundreds of citizens marched in remembrance of Eleni, holding signs reading, "Justice for Eleni." Activists urged the country to recognize the case as an act of femicide, a gender-based killing, and called for stronger measures to combat violence against women. At the courthouse, the two defendants walked out coldly, while Eleni's parents absorbed every insult and provocation from the defense. When the presiding judge rose and declared, "The court hereby sentences both defendants to life imprisonment. The order is to be executed immediately," the entire room fell silent. Giannis's sob echoed through the chamber, the strangled cry of a father who had already lost too much. Justice had been delivered, but the shadow of the case lingered. In the days that followed, Eleni's family and numerous social organizations continued to raise awareness, urging society to protect women and condemn gender-based violence. From a 1-year-old girl in a small town, Eleni became a symbol of the fight against brutality toward women, a symbol that forced Greece to confront its failures and change. Take a moment to remember Eleni, a 1-year-old who entered life with a bright smile and left it with a desperate cry swallowed by the night. She deserved to live, to be loved, and to experience every beautiful moment ahead of her, yet fate stripped everything away before she could even say goodbye. Her story leaves us with a painful truth. Sometimes a single moment of misplaced trust, a seemingly harmless invitation, can lead to an unimaginable tragedy. And more terrifying still is the fact that there are people capable of exploiting trust with chilling cruelty. Yet amid the sorrow, there remains a glimmer of humanity illuminated by this case. Eleni's family, pushed into the deepest abyss of grief, stood firm to reclaim justice for their daughter. They showed us that kindness and determination can shine through even the darkest corners of society. From their strength, we long even more for a world where women are safe, respected, and never left to face danger alone. In the end, may Eleni's story remind you and me of vigilance, compassion, and our responsibility to protect one another, so that one day, when her name is spoken again, we remember not only the pain, but the power of change, her story ignited for an entire generation.